a close friend who was up from Chowchilla staying with me for a couple of days. And while she was here, she received a call from her best high school friend who said, my brother's been placed in the hospital. He's got cancer. We're not sure if he's going to make it. And 2 days later, I received a phone call asking me to do the memorial service. And as I was sitting there talking to the family, all of a sudden I went, click, this is my girlfriend's, Marilyn's best friend's brother. And it was kind of strange to put that whole thing together. So anyway, we're going to do a meditation this morning, and it's going to be a little bit different than what you're used to. Because this month's theme is about compassion, I'm going to do a Buddhist meditation this morning that is centered around compassion. So we won't be asking for what is it that you want to pray for and want to work for. We're just going to go directly into that place of meditation and that place of stillness. So just kind of allow yourself at this point to settle into your chairs, into a comfortable position. And if you'd like, go ahead and close your eyes. And just notice your breathing as it begins to slow down. And notice how much fuller it is. And also put a hand over your heart. And just allow this to be a reminder to bring awareness to yourself. And now bring to mind a person or another living being. Maybe it's a pet that you have that always makes you smile. It could be a child, a grandmother, a spouse, a co-worker, whoever naturally brings happiness to your heart. Perhaps it's a bird outside your window. Let yourself feel what it's like to be in that person's or that being's presence. Allow yourself to enjoy the good company. Now recognizing how this being wishes to be happy and free from suffering just like you and every other being. Repeating softly and gently, feeling the importance of your words. Just go within and say, may you be safe. May you be peaceful. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. And continue to repeat that mantra in your own mind as you center on that individual. May you be safe. May you be peaceful. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. And if you notice that your mind has wandered, return to the words and the image of the loved one you have in mind. Savor the warm feelings that may rise. Just take your time. Now adding yourself to this circle of goodwill, putting your hand over your heart again, feeling the warmth and the gentle pressure of your hand there. Add yourself to the meditation. May you and I be safe. May you and I be peaceful. May you and I be healthy. May you and I live with ease. And continue with that mantra for yourself and your beloved. Now letting go of the image of the other and letting the full focus of your attention rest directly and entirely on yourself. Visualize your whole body in your mind's eye. Notice any stress or uneasiness that may be lingering within you. Breathe into them, allowing them to relax. And offer yourself the phrases, may I be safe, may I be peaceful, may I be healthy, may I live with ease. And continue with this mantra for yourself. Now let go of the image of yourself and bring full focus and attention on someone you are currently challenged by. It may be a relative, it may be a coworker, maybe it's a friend. But keeping your hand on your heart, feeling the warmth and the gentleness and the love within. Return to, may you be safe, may you be peaceful, may you be healthy, may you live with ease. Perhaps there are different words that speak to you more directly than the ones we've already used. See if you can offer yourself some words that you might like to hear from others or that you would like to say to others. Go ahead and say those to yourself right now. And finally, taking a few breaths and just resting quietly in your own body. Savor the goodwill and compassion that flows naturally from your heart. Know that you can return to this place and to these phrases and to this moment of peace and compassion compassion anytime you wish. May you be safe. May you be peaceful. May you be healthy. May you live with ease. And so it is. Amen. Well, good morning. It's nice to be back here without my angel uniform on. And to be sharing this time with you. Sam, do you have it going yet?
Oh, yeah, you're up and running.
Oh, I'm up and running. Okay, just wanted to double check with you. I've decided I'm going to start with a quiz this morning. Now, don't worry about it. It's an easy one. I know you guys can handle it. I'm going to give you a word, and I want you to give me the opposite of that word. Okay, are you ready?
Out loud?
Yes.
Out loud. You're going to shout it out to me. The opposite of fast is
Slow.
The opposite of long is
Short.
The opposite of cold is
Hot.
The opposite of young is old. The opposite of soft is
Hard.
Sour,
Sweet.
high,
Low.
rich,
Poor.
love,
Hate.
fear. Yeah, it is hate. But you know what? I don't think that necessarily hate is the opposite of love. From my experience and my perspective, I think that it's really the opposite of love is apathy. And when we look at the definition of apathy, it says not taking any interest in anything, not breathing to do anything. It's a lack of emotion or a concern, especially when it relates to matters of general concern. Remember when you were a kid back at school and there was somebody that would bully you or pester you or bug you or tease you and you'd go home and you'd complain to mom and dad and they'd say, oh, just ignore it. Sticks and stones can break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Or how about they'd say, oh, just pretend they're not there. Just imagine that you can't see them. Or don't give them any attention at all in your life. And eventually, hopefully that child or that person would ignore you and go fixate on someone else. Even though this advice that our parents would give us was momentarily helpful, it was not enabling us of how to cope with a bad situation. It was really just apathy in disguise. And from the time we are young children, we are taught how not to deal with our emotions. Don't feel that way. Don't allow somebody to bug you. Don't take that on. Those are all statements that we've all heard. The truth is that those who intentionally hurt us are actually hurting themselves. If we stop and think about the bullies that exist in the world or that are in our schools right now, those bullies are more than likely bullied at home. They have their own set and series of challenges. They're intentionally hurting others because they are hurt and broken themselves. What they really need all along is more love and, of course, compassion, not apathy, not turning our back on them. In The Revealing Word by Charles Fillmore, he tells us that compassion is a characteristic of love and mercy prompted by an understanding heart. A compassionate mind sees the error but does not condemn. Buddha tells us that compassion is our awareness of suffering. Compassion means actually to suffer with another person. The word has a very strong personal element to it. To have compassion means more than just feeling sorry, however, for someone else. It means to get down where they are in the midst of their sorrow and pain and experience it with them. I love the definition that Ernest Holmes provides. He says that compassion and caring are the ties that bind us together in mutual understanding and in the unified attempt to uncover the divinity in each other. Compassion is the most gentle of all human virtues, for it is the outpouring of the divine givingness through all. Whenever I think of compassion, being raised as a small child in a very Christian home, I always go back to the story of the Good Samaritan in the Bible, because I think that that's the epitome of compassion. And that's from Luke 10:25-37. But before I share that story with you and we talk about it from a little bit of a metaphysical perspective, I want you to understand something about Samaritans. Now, Samaritans were not liked by Jews. In fact, their heritage was Hebrew and Assyrian. And they were descendants, or they claimed to be the descendants of Abraham, and they taught the books of Moses. However, they were not recognized by the Jewish religion. They were branded by the Jews as renegades, religious renegades. And metaphysically, when we look at the word Samaritan, we understand that what it represents is a consciousness in which truth and error are mixed together or mixed up. That's like knowing we're guided to be love and compassion and for the truth of us, instead of mixing in judgment and frustration when we see a homeless person, for example, on the street, if they just get a job. That's like truth and error. Now I'm going to read you the whole parable here, or the whole situation, because Jesus is speaking, and they talk about a scribe. Well, a scribe was actually an attorney or a lawyer back then. So, and behold, the scribe stood up to test him and said, "Teacher, what shall I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" He answered, saying to him, "You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." Jesus said to him, "You spoke the truth. Do this and you shall live." But because he wanted to justify himself, he said to him, "And who is my neighbor?" That's the scribe speaking. And Jesus said to him, "There was a man who went from Jerusalem to Jericho." And I want to tell you that when Jesus tells parables, he never uses actual locations in Israel. This is the only parable in which he does that. Jerusalem to Jericho, and the bandits attacked him and robbed him and beat him and left him with little life remaining in him, and they went away. And it chanced a priest was going down the road, and he saw him and passed on. And likewise a Levite came and arrived at that place and saw him and passed on. But a Samaritan, as he journeyed, came where he was, and when he saw him, he had compassion on him. And he came to him and bound up his wounds and poured on them wine and oil, and he put him on his own ass and brought him to the inn and took care of him. And in the morning he took out 2 pennies and gave them to the innkeeper and said to him, "Take care of him, and whatever you spend more, when I return, I will give it to you." Who therefore of these 3 are, as it appears to you, become neighbor to him who fell into the hands of the bandit? And he said, the scribe, "The one who was compassionate or showed compassion on him." Jesus said to him, "You go also and do likewise." Interesting parable. Interesting situation. 2 people that normally would not get along with each other, one saving the other. In the parable I've just read, a man came to see Jesus with a very curious question, which is, "Who is my neighbor?" In one sense, that sentence actually seems to answer itself. Just look around you. We're all neighbors. We're all neighbors, and you see your neighbors every day, whether they live next to you or whether you see them in a restaurant, whether you see them in the Winco or whether you see them driving down the street. The people in our community our extended community, as well as our family community, are our neighbors. All the Jews at the time of Jesus were commanded to love your neighbor as yourself. And of course, the tough part to that statement is, and as yourself. And in the parable, Jesus uses the Samaritan as a person who was willing to do good, even though they were probably despised by this individual that they were saving, that they were picking up and caring for. But Jesus said that this half-breed, this hated Samaritan, came along and saw the poor man lying there. And so when he found him out that the victim was still alive, he took wine and poured them into his wounds. He dressed his wounds. He picked him up. He put him on the donkey, which meant that he had to walk. And he took him into the local town, took him to an inn, paid the innkeeper to take care of him, and indicated at the end, and I will come back and pay more for whatever you need. He was loving the wounded man as himself. He was showing compassion. Let me to make two observations about this story. First, what the Samaritan did was truly above and beyond normal human obligations. He might have, in the process of trying to save this man, been hurt and damaged himself. Today, if we saw somebody who was beaten or in a car accident or was damaged and hurt, we just pick up our cell phones and dial 911 and wait for the EMTs to get there. However, that wasn't possible back then. There were no cell phones, there were no EMTs, no ambulances to come and save the day over those treacherous mountains from Jerusalem to Jericho. If this man was to survive at all, the Samaritan would have to take on the total burden and total responsibility for saving him. Either he got involved or the man would lay there and die. Seen in that light, many of us might have been hesitant. After all, who wants to take on total responsibility? After all, we all have things to go, places to do, places to go, people to see. I don't know anyone who isn't busy in this day and age. The demands of life lie heavy on all of us, and we can't save the world alone. There is a second point to this notice, and it is that the Samaritan could not have known what he was getting himself into. He didn't know the degree that he was going to be financially committed. He didn't know how much it was going to cost him. He didn't know if there would be a place at the inn for this man when he got to the next community. If this man was he didn't know that. Don't miss the point, however, when he saw this man by the road, he eventually didn't do a mental calculation and say, I'm going to end up paying for this man's total hotel bill. He didn't think about that when he stopped to pour wine and oil on his sores. That came later on. As a practical matter, he couldn't have known what was going to be required of him to help save this man. The only decision he had to make was, should I get involved or should I pass on by on the other side of the road and ignore him? We rarely know what compassion will demand of us, which is why we ought not to be overly calculating before we get involved. Sometimes the help we give will be brief and easy to do, momentary, offering a glass of wine, making a telephone call for somebody, sitting with them for a few moments until the EMTs arrived. Most of the time, we can't do it all ourselves. And even in this story, the Samaritan couldn't do it all by himself. He needed the help of the innkeeper to bring the man back to health. He left him in the care of someone else and went on his way with the promise that he would return and pay his bill. No one can do it all, and no one is being asked to do it all. But we can all do something. Sometimes we will discover that the demands are long and lasting and heavy burdens to bear. Many of us have been required to be caregivers to adult parents, to spouses, to siblings with long-lasting illnesses that drag on for years. As the months and years drag by, sometimes it becomes a heavy, heavy burden. And yet we are asked to show up and to be compassionate. Compassion is based on need, not worth. In the story of the Good Samaritan, we are told briefly about the man who was robbed and injured. We're not told what his job was. We're not told what his marital status was. We have no idea what his economic status was. We don't know where he came from. He could have been a traveling salesman for all we know. We don't know what he liked and what he disliked. All we knew is that he was hurting. When we allow our compassion to respond to a situation, we do so not by the worth of the recipient, but by the individual's needs. People who are compassionate feel something. It would have been shocking for Jesus to have told the people that this man was helped by just an ordinary man, but it is not even a Jew helping a Jew, but rather a Samaritan helping a Jew. And typically the Jews would have ignored this man and would have had nothing to do with him. Given the mutual hatred between Jews and Samaritans, it would have been more likely to have expected that the Samaritan would have been the one of the three who would have walked on by and ignored this man. Today we call this story the story of the Good Samaritan. 2,000 years ago, you would have never ever put good and Samaritan together. It was just not so. In fact, they probably couldn't even consider saying those words, good and Samaritan, in the same sentence. The passage says that when he saw him, he had compassion. The Greek word used here for compassion, and please pardon me, I'm going to try and say it as best I can, spanchanitsomai, and it's a very vivid word. It comes from a word that refers to intestines or bowels. Sounds pretty gross, doesn't it? But it's the equivalent of what we mean by gut feeling. A gut feeling is one that comes from deep within each and every one of us. The Samaritan saw the same pitiful man lying in agony beside the road, and his heart churned, and he could not pass without helping him. It was a gut feeling. That's the way compassion affects all of us. It stirs us from within. It troubles us. It keeps us awake at night. And it kind of forces us into that place of having to do something. When that Samaritan looked at that suffering man lying half dead on the side of the road, something happened to him within. Something happened within his gut. Something happened that made it impossible for him to walk away. There is no logical reason for the Samaritan to rearrange his plans or spend his money to help one of his enemies, and yet he did. Of all the people that passed this injured man by, the Samaritan that had the least reason to help, he was a no account in his society before this incident and would remain a no account afterwards. But he did it anyway. Compassion not only feels something, but it also does something. Compassion moves us into action. Not only was the Samaritan's compassion based on the need rather than the worth of the victim, but it caused the Samaritan to feel something so deep that it had to be expressed through his actions. He doesn't pass by on the other side. He doesn't move away from, he moves towards. He moves to the injured man. He must move towards people to express compassion. We can't walk away if we want to build relationships. It is not something that is just mystically happens. It takes concentrated effort on our part. It often is not convenient to be compassionate. But don't forget that the Samaritan is moving towards someone who, if he was conscious, would despise him. Someone, no doubt, would not do the same for him if the situation was reversed. The parable details in 6 verbs just how active this man's compassion was. He went to him, he bandaged his wounds, he poured oil and wine on his wounds, he put him on a donkey, he brought him to an inn, and he took care of him. 6 verbs. And every one of his acts, he demonstrated compassion as he responded in a practical, timely, and unselfish way. It's important to recognize that he took the time also to take care of himself. He didn't try and do it all. He knew he couldn't, so he passed him off to the innkeeper with the willingness to pay for it. We may not be able to help everywhere or help everyone, and we can't help somewhere and try to do a meaningful work of service, but we can do something, somewhere. Compassion costs something. This man, the Samaritan, really went the extra mile. He took his man to the inn and saw to it that the innkeeper would look after him. He also promised that he would return and fully reimburse the innkeeper for any additional expenses that he might incur. He left money to take care of the man who had been injured, and he gave the innkeeper no limits. He didn't say, oh, you can only spend 5 cents. You can only spend 2 pennies. He put no limits on him. There is nothing more the Samaritan could have done to show his compassion to this man. Compassion demonstrates our relationship to God. At the conclusion of this story, Jesus asks the scribe or the lawyer one additional question. Which of these 3 do you think was the neighbor to him who fell among the thieves? And the lawyer almost chokes on his words. You can just hear it. He doesn't want to say the word Samaritan. And so instead, he got out of it in a sneaky way by saying, he who showed mercy on him. The second question that the lawyer has asked at the beginning was, who is my neighbor? The question had been turned on him, and it is now, what kind of neighbor am I? Let us remember that our interactions with our earthly parents are a reflection of our relationship and interaction with the divine. How we show compassion to the neighbor on the street demonstrates our relationship with God. It is that capacity to love, that capacity to be kind in all situations, even when we are angry and frustrated ourselves, or even when we have kicked into judgment. And it is that willingness to serve even in the most difficult of times. Compassion is being safe, peaceful, healthy, and living with ease. Even Kayla Mueller, who was an ISIS hostage that was recently killed, had compassion for her hostages, for her fellow people that were imprisoned with her, as well as her family. When you read her last letter, it blows you away because of the compassion and the love that she felt even for those who were choosing to kill her. Compassion is that willingness to let go of our judgment and just be with the individual, the situation, and their pain. There was once a very wise and beloved king. Everybody in the land absolutely adored him and loved him because he cared about his people. And oftentimes he would leave his castle and he would walk out into the countryside and be with his people and talk to them and question them and find out how they were doing. And when he wanted to make sure that he was really hearing the truth, he'd put on disguises and he'd go out into the countryside and be with them. And one day he decided that he was going to he dressed as a poor villager and he went to visit where the public baths were. Now, the public baths that were there in this tiny little community the water was kept warm by the boilers that were down in the cellar. And there was this old man who kept the boilers and kept the wood going in this tiny, dark, and dank space. And the king went down into the cellar with him and pretended that he was this poor man, just like him, who was keeping the boilers going so others might have the warm bath. And they shared meals together and they would chit chat and back forth. And the king showed interest in what the man was doing because nobody else ever showed up to speak to this boiler man, this man who made their hot bath possible. And one day when the king came back, he had thought and thought and thought about it, and he decided that he was going to tell him that he was really the king. And he did so with a little bit of risk and with a little bit of trepidation. Because, you know, a lot of people, when they found out he was king, would ask for great gifts or would ask for riches to be given unto them. Because, after all, he was king. He had so much. And so this day, he went ahead and he sat down breaking bread and 2 or more with the keeper of the boiler room and shared with him that he was the king of the land. The man sat there, all these dirty and dungy place around him, and said, "You left your comfortable place to sit with me in this hot and dingy, dinky cellar. To others you gave riches, to others you gave great gifts, but to me you gave the greatest of all. You gave me your friendship, your compassion, and your love. You gave me yourself." Are you willing to give the gift of yourself through the compassionate acts of love? And just what will those be in the days to come? This is the truth in my life, and this is the truth in yours, and so it is.